Hi everyone, I'm Paige. Welcome back to my channel, and this week I am going to be talking about outlining. I'm going to go over the 4 main outlines that you can do, and then I'm going to kind of show you what my outlining process looks like. Hint, hint, it's one of the 4. Um, so without further ado, let's get started. So one of the questions that I see the most on Facebook or Reddit that comes up across my personal feeds are always kind of the how do I get started? How do I get started writing a novel? Now, this is not going to apply for everybody because some people just aren't outliners, and that's okay. You can just write a story. You can be a discovery writer. And learn about your characters as you go along. I think to some extent, all of us are somewhat discovery writers as we write. We learn more about our characters, and sometimes that means we have to go back and change a lot of things that we originally outlined. And that's okay. Writing is a process, and we do it because we love it, not because we want to make $1 million. Most of us won't. And yeah. So I'm definitely more on the planner side of writing. And as I was researching kind of the different types of outlining methods, as I was learning more about them, I discovered that there are those 4 main outlines. So you have a synopsis outline, a bookend outline, the snowflake outline, and a detailed outline. So there's 4. And all of the outlines that people do will generally fall into one of these 4 categories, or they'll kind of mix them together. So the synopsis outline is kind of the more quick and dirty outline. This is kind of what you would see on a book jacket. When you are doing a synopsis outline, you want to introduce your main characters, the main stake, and then one thing that is different than a book jacket, how it's going to end. So you have your starting point, the main conflict that is going on, and the ending. You can also add in what the inciting incident is and how your character reacts to that. So whenever in the beginning, say for an example, they're in a car crash and one of the protagonist's friends die. Well, how does the protagonist react? Do they feel like they need to go on a quest for justice? How deeply do they grieve? How they grieve is also really important. So looking at how a character reacts to the inciting incident is very important. And that is why you are putting it in your synopsis outline. This tells you one of the things that drives the character. Another example is it can be a broad reaction as well. So Sally got cold feet at her wedding. She left her fiance at the altar, and now she's finding her new life in a coastal town in Maine. I made that up. Sounds very Hallmarky though, so maybe. The second part of the synopsis outline is going to be the second act. So what are the stakes of the story? Where's the majority of the story going to happen? What are the major plot points you want to hit? Like I said, this is quick and dirty. This is going to be a page, maybe a page and a half or 2. It's not going to be very much. And this type of outline lets you figure out all of those plot points and what your characters are going to be doing without having all of the characteristics in it and without going scene by scene by scene by scene. So it allows you a little bit of creative freedom during the actual writing process. And then the final part of the synopsis outline is where you are wrapping up the story. Was there a resolution? Does it tie back to the inciting incident? Did Sally finally live to learn herself because she left her fiance at the altar? Did she go back to her fiance that she left at the altar? Did she find somebody new? All of these scenarios tie back to that inciting incident, but are completely different ways that you can end the story. So the second outline that you have is a bookend outline. This is where your characters are pretty well mapped out. You have a strong grasp of what you like, what those characters will say, do, act like. This is more character driven than plot driven. I would say the synopsis outline typically is more plot driven, and then the bookend outline is more character driven. and you know how the story is going to start and you know how it's going to end, but you don't have anything in the stressy, messy middle yet figured out. And yeah, that's okay. With this method, you are leaving a blank canvas for you to explore while you're writing. So you say, take kind of nerdy art history reference here. Take a triptych. You know what the left panel looks like. You know what the right panel looks like, but you don't know what's happening in the middle. And the middle is the main part of the story whenever you're looking at a triptych. For those of you who don't know, triptychs are put into a lot of religious houses. They usually sit at the altar. And the most famous one is the one by Hieronymus Bosch, which is the Garden of Earthly Delights. Extremely interesting to look at. One side represents heaven, the left side does, the right side represents hell, the middle is whatever the heck's happening on earth. Very interesting and very, very creepy in some ways as well. I highly suggest you go look at it. And with the bookend method, you can help avoid writing yourself into a corner. This is one thing that happens fairly often with people who are kind of pantsing it, and they have to go back and figure things out as later, while they're like doing their discovery draft. Sometimes they write themselves into a corner. So this kind of lets you give you so this method kind of gives you a roadmap, per se. You know where you're starting, you know where you're ending. So as long as you can make sure you can work through that middle, and keeping that main goal of the end in mind. That is the most important thing whenever you are doing these outlines. So if you know where you want to go, do that first. That's and you'll see how when I do show my outlining method, you'll kind of see what I mean when I say do that first. Because if you know the ending and you know the beginning, you have an ability to be like, okay, how do I get from point A to point B, and how do I make my characters want that as well? What can I do to keep them from wanting that? Or getting that even though they want it. So say you're writing a World War II novel. The beginning is 1945, the Pearl Harbor, and then the ending is going to be at the end with D-Day. So how are they going to get to D-Day? How is these characters going to fight the war to get to that end goal? Make sense? I think. I don't know. I made that up. um, the example, not the premise. So your third method is your snowflake method. This one is very popular. I've heard lots of people talk about it online. And even if they don't necessarily call it the snowflake method, that is definitely what they are describing whenever they're writing. So the snowflake method this allows you to explore the story in a similar way to as free writing, to know whether or not the story is going to work without physically sitting down and writing out 70 or 80,000 words. You flesh out your main characters, you're able to flesh out the stakes, and you are able so the snowflake method starts very small and it grows like a snowflake. You have the centerpiece, the thing that is going to keep the rest of it together. This is going to be your log line. This is 1 or 2 sentences. Say, this is what my story is about. So for example, I'm trying to think of so the snowflake method has the one thing at the center, the thing that's holding everything else together. And this is your log line. This is the thing that's going to get the story going. So for example, you have Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass series. The log line for the first book is Selena just got out of a slave camp of the salt mines. She is now going to fight, participate in these trials to become the king assassin. Can she succeed? Bam. 3 sentences, super easy, gives you the premise of the story, and allows you to start fleshing out the characters. So when you have the log line, you're now going to expand it into a full paragraph. 78 sentences, not that that way you can kind of get a little bit more feel of the story. You have the log line holding it together, so that way you can think of, okay, this is what I really want to get across. This is the one thing that needs to happen. Now, what else can I have happen? So you can introduce the antagonist here. You can introduce any secondary characters. Do you have another major character that needs to be talked about in the story? The third step in the snowflake method is starting to create the character profiles that you started to introduce. That you can add on any extra characters that you want to hear, that anybody that you think would be important, even if it's only for a section of the book, that you know that you want them in there. And then this way, whenever you start writing, you have all of these characters, wants, needs, all of that already cataloged, already in your brain, and you can just go. And finally, you take everything that you had done already and you expand it into a multi-page plot summary. This is going to be 3-4 pages. It can really be however long you want it, and I'll kind of show you a version of what I do. Like I said, a lot of people do these a little bit of like combined in some way or another, just something that works for them. So if there's an element in something that I'm talking about that you're like, I want to try that, but I do this, try it and see if it will work with your outlining process to kind of get you to think about everything that you have going on in your story. And finally, we have the detailed outlining method. This is the one that I personally use the most. It works best with how I write, how I think, because I am a part-time writer with a full-time job, basically. I can only write a little bit every day. I write about an hour every night if I can do it. And so having this detailed outline lets me pick a scene whenever I'm finished with one, and I can just go at it. I don't like writing sequentially. It works for me because I'm able to go and pick out a scene that I want to work on after I finish one. That excites me. I know this isn't the best because by the time I'm getting to the end, I'm like, oh, these are all the terrible scenes that I don't really want to write. But it makes me excited to sit down and write every night whenever I am working on a scene that I am excited to work on. I don't write from start to finish. I pick and choose scenes that I want to write, and then I'll kind of go together and mesh them all together. And then if I need to, I'll go put snippets in other places. You would have this problem if you did write in order because you're constantly changing things. Like I said, everybody is a combination of a planner and a pantser. So, yeah. So as I said earlier, I have changed my own outlining method from the first book of the Fae story to the second one. And I'm going to be showing you a combination of both. The example I have for the detailed is from the first, just because that was what popped in my brain easier. So that way I can kind of show you what my template looks like. I have it handwritten. I usually do it on the computer, so then that way I can go and change things pretty easily and I can do some maths. So I will also note that the Face story is the first book that I actually outlined, but it was the one I got done fastest. I don't know if that's just because I'm at the time in my life where I was able to finish it pretty quickly. I say quickly, it took me a year to physically write it, with some breaks because of life events and stuff, which is fine. Like life happens. Life sucks. Let's just say that. So first I'm going to kind of tell you how I start my outlining process, and then I'll get really into the detailed outline portion. So when I first start outlining, I do kind of a version of the snowflake method. But I start at the very end of the snowflake method. I write these multi-page summaries of what I want to happen. So this is going to be an example of what I am currently working on. So I have this. And then I added some things with the sticky notes. And there. So my summary for this one, I start very specific. I kind of, when I start writing, I know what I want to happen in plot in Act 1. So I plot that out very, very detailed. So I have multiple main characters in this story. So I kind of did 2 or 3 paragraphs for each main character and what I wanted them to achieve in Act 1. And then I went to Act 2 and this, and then here, this is what I kind of numbered the things. These are the things that happen in Act 1 that affect Act 2, and this is what I want Act 2 to look like. And for each of those characters, I did just like 2 bullet points. This is what this character needs to do in this act to get to the final part. And then at the final part, it's nothing but a bunch of bullet points. It's not split up into characters. These are just kind of the main things that need to happen to end the story. So I have that, oh, these characters are all separated. I want them together by the end of this act, or by this act. I need them to all start, I need the conflict to really be reaching its apex. These people need to be there for that to happen. This character has been missing for the entire story. Where the hell is she? No one knows. Oh, here she is with an explanation of where she was. Kind of like that. And it's just a bunch of bullet points. It isn't super detailed. But then I start so now I have my main plot points. These are the things that I know need to happen in each act. They're not always super specific. As I said, Act 3 is just a bunch of bullet points, but we'll find out more as we get there and we're outlining. So after I finish that, I'll head over to, I use a spreadsheet whenever I'm doing this, and that's just because I like using the table, but I don't want to add it into Word, and it would take far too long to handwrite, and I would probably get carpal tunnel to do handwriting all of it. So here's an example. Like I said, this is from the first book of what I have and that is going on. So you may think this seems familiar. That's because it is. It is very similar to J.K. Rowling's outlining method. I have dumbed it down a little bit, but I use a lot of the same elements, and that's just because it was the easiest way for me to do it, and I kind of came to this on my own, and then found out that J.K. Rowling uses this method later. I have it broken down, so by scene and chapter. So in the first book, I just did by chapter. I then broke it down in the second one by chapter and then by scene in each chapter. The second one, I have whose point of view it is. The third is supporting characters. The fourth is where it is happening. The fifth is what exactly is happening. What are the main points I want to get across? And then the last one is just the word count that I think it may be. I don't stick to this. I don't know why I put it. I think I just like having something that I can put there and seeing how close I am. I'm usually not that close. When I start with the chapter or scene number, I put the, as I said, I've changed this since the first book. So I put the chapter in and I make that entire row a different color so I know when I'm switching chapters, when I'm just like looking at it at a glance, and then I put each individual scene number. And okay. So once I have my document set up, that's when I actually start going and outlining, and I'll usually add things in as I'm going along. I'll put another column, and I don't label this for some reason. I just don't see the need, mainly because I don't use sources for every single one I have. But if I do have a very specific source that I would like to integrate with it, in the first phase story, I really needed to know what the Arthurian like griffin would have looked like and how it would have acted. So I found a very specific text that I wanted to use, and I put that next to the scene in my document. So then that way I kind of knew what I was using in my research, and then I can just go easily click into it, open it up, be like, oh, yep, that's exactly what I need to say. This is how I need to describe it. And then I can continue writing. The entire goal for this outlining process, and I said this already, but is just to make sure that I am able to sit down and just start writing. This is really important for me because I want to increase my ability to write a novel while working full time and be able to maintain that throughout my career. I really love my job. So being able to do the two things that I love is important to me. So if I am able to just sit down and write and I'm able to crank out 700 to 1,000 words every hour, every night, and then work a little bit more on the weekends, that is phenomenal. And this outlining process really helps me do that. And then as I outline, I'll usually take a Tuesday, and since that's one of my days off, and I'll update my Scrivener document. Maybe I'll put some notes in the notes section, and then that way, when I'm about ready to start writing, I'm not having to spend 2 or 3 hours setting up the Scrivener document to how that I had to reflect what's on my spreadsheet. It seems like a lot of extra work, but being able to see the entirety of the novel on one page, and I know there's a way you can do in this Scrivener, but I'm gonna stick with my spreadsheet. That's just really helpful for me to kind of be able just to go up 3 rows and be like, okay, yep, that's what I had her do last time, so I need to continue up there. So that's my outlining process. Please let me know down below what outlining you use. Do you outline at all? Do you use the snowflake method? If you do, please tell me how that goes, because I am always very interested. That's not something I've ever done. Like I said, I do the last step in it, but I don't do all the first ones. If you do the snowflake method, do you modify it at all? Also, if you don't outline, do you go back and do a reverse outline? I know a lot of people who do that, where they'll do the discovery draft and then go back and outline based on each scene before they start editing. So, like I said, let me know down below in the comments. And if you like this video, please hit that like button and the subscribe button. I post videos about once a week, sometimes twice, but don't get your hopes up. And thank you for watching. Have a great day, y'all.